Labor Talks was John DeRosier, recorded at Chippewa Valley Community Television in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
Welcome to Labor Talks. Today's guest is Carol Craig, former president of the Eau Claire Area School Board. My name is John DeRosier, and Carol, welcome to Labor Talks.
Thank you, John. I appreciate this opportunity.
Okay. And we'll get right to it. How long did you serve on the school board, and how long were you the Eau Claire Area School Board president?
Well, I served on the school board. I actually was elected the first time in 1982. I was rather young, and then I served until 1994, and I decided I didn't want to run again. I felt that there were other opportunities and other candidates. And then in 2004, various individuals had encouraged me to run again. And so I chose to run again, and I was elected again, and I served until this last end, 2014, May of 2014. Total years of service are 21 years of service, and I was the school board president for 5 of those years. I served as vice president and treasurer as well, and served on many community organizations and committees.
And let's see, why did you resign from the school board?
Well, I don't know that I resigned exactly. I think after 21 years, I've made a contribution, and we had a new superintendent, we had new board members, and they were really functioning very well. And I think really it's a matter of saying other people's ideas need to be present at the table as well. So it was a matter of just giving other people a chance to serve. It truly is a service opportunity, and there are a lot of good people that wanted that chance to serve as well. John?
So you really didn't resign, you just decided not to run again?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I chose not to run again. There were candidates out there that were excited, enthused about having that opportunity, and I said, let at it, you know?
Okay. How has Act 10, we're all familiar with Act 10, how has it affected negotiations between the public school employees and the Eau Claire Area School Board? That is the time when you were serving on the school board.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if everyone's familiar with what Act 10 really is. You know, if you cut through the chase, Act 10 was a piece of legislation that essentially said for the many decades that employees sat down with the managers and worked out working conditions, whether it be how much time you spend in preparation, whether it meant class size, whether it meant the amount of pay you received, your professional development, discipline procedure. For decades, they sat down and had mutual agreements that would be workable for both management and employees. Act 10 basically said all of that goes into the garbage can. You no longer will be using any of those standards or contract negotiations or stipulations in making decisions. So essentially what Act 10 did was sort of stop the communication between employees and administration and the board. So with that, if you just think about that, you know that what's happened then is there's been a huge communication barrier. And then secondly, I think a lot of disrespect, John. If you were part of a team that worked hand in hand with administrators and board and employee groups to build the best working environment you could build, and someone arbitrarily said, it's all gone now, you would say, what position does that place me in? So I think there was some disrespect that was happening. There was also some fear, John. I mean, you can appreciate the fear. If they can take away every one of the standards that we had, then that means they can take away the fact that we are contributing to effective teaching, that they can take away our ability to determine whether or not a certain curriculum would be beneficial to students. They could take away our benefits. It really was in a very, I think, a fearful environment, a frustrated environment. So Act 10 was a bombshell by all intents and purposes. So when that happened in 2010, our school board just went, wow, what do we do now? How do we handle this without creating disruption and more frustration and more fear? That was the real challenge facing our school board. How do we handle post-Act 10?
There are those in our state government who have described Act 10 as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
Now I realize that I'm asking you to repeat yourself, but I don't think you quite view Act 10 as a tool.
Well, it depends on what you mean as a tool. I mean, if you are working on a car, fixing a car, you would hope that the tools that you have are compatible with the car. So if we're working on tools that will help complement and enhance public education, you need to have the tools that would do that. And you're talking about having staff that are well trained. You're talking about having curriculum that's 21st century curriculum. You're talking about having classrooms that have technology that is going to be expected in the workforce. Those are the tools that public education needs. The tools we had essentially were to cut our budgets, to cut retirement, cut our compensation packages, and any other budget cut that there was. And in fact, that's what ended up happening. We had a 15% decrease in our budget because of Act 10. So in some regards, they, first of all, didn't give us tools that are compatible or aligned with good public education. They literally took whatever toolbox we had away and said, somehow now operate on a budget that's 15% less. And that really talks to the heart of our employees. Our employees really knew what that meant. It meant that they would take reduction in pay. And that was a huge part of the morale issue that actually happened throughout the state. We have teachers fleeing education right now, right and left, John. 40 to 50% of new teachers that start the profession are now leaving within 5 years. They're not feeling valued, appreciated. They're not being able to express their professional talents in an environment that's very, very, I guess what's the word I want to say? It's stifled, for lack of a better word. It's a stifling educational environment when your budget is cut so much and you're told to somehow continue functioning. So when you have that many of your young professionals leaving, you know that that's a sign that it's not good.
You said that there are those teachers who believe that their talent, their professional abilities have been affected.
Mm-hmm.
Did they ever give you specific reasons as to how their abilities have been made difficult?
Well, if, for example, just as an example, when your budget is cut, but you have more students coming into the school district, you have more expectations for curriculum, you have technology that you have to now integrate. If you have no resources to do that, your hands are tied. You want to be able to contribute, but you're not able to because you simply don't have the time in the day or the resources to do it. It's like a surgeon who is going to do surgery and has all the skills for surgery, but the operating lights are dim, or the backup system that you really need to do surgery well is not in place, and all of a sudden you create this situation where I'm not really using my professional talents very effectively. So then on top of that, if you add the layer of standardized testing that we now have in our school districts, our state report card, and it becomes, do we teach to the tests or do we teach to our diverse students that are out there and making sure their individual talents are being met? So that's another really tough balance that educators throughout the United States, not just in Wisconsin, are being faced with. How do we deal with the introduction of so many standardized tests where we begin teaching to the tests? That's not something that most of our really good teachers want to do.
So a very quick answer would be this: they're spread too thin. The teachers are spread too thin. They've got an increased number of students in their respective classrooms.
Well, they have increased class size, they have increased curricular responsibilities, they have decreased professional development time to develop the skills that they need. They have less compensation. It's sort of like do more, but in the last 5 years, accept the fact that your compensation's been cut by almost 15%. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, if you were in any occupation and those kind of conditions happened, I don't care whether, as I said, you're a surgeon or you're an accountant or a professional educator, you got to sit back and you got to ask yourself, where's this going? In what direction is this really going? Is that what I want to do? Be part of that direction that it's going in? And as I said, our young educators are saying, you know what? This is not the way I'm going to be able to raise my family. I'm not going to be able to develop my professional skills. There may be some alternatives for me, and they start looking at those alternatives. The University of Eau Claire saw almost a 40% decrease in the amount of education majors since Act 10. So that's not just our current teachers that are teaching. God love them because they're in there and they're every day doing what they do best. But there's people all over the place that are saying, why would I get into education given this current sort of national and certainly within our state anti-teaching mentality that seems to be happening?
Now, I owe you and the teachers an apology because I asked a question and I didn't like the way I formed the question. That is, how did Act 10 affect teachers' professional abilities? And that's not a good question. Not at all, because the teachers obviously are very professional and very capable in teaching. So I apologize for that. What I meant to ask was, how did Act 10 affect teachers' performance?
Mm-hmm.
Am I making myself clear here?
To be honest, no. In terms of their performance, they roll up their sleeves, and every single day, whether a kid comes into school who hasn't had breakfast, whether a kid comes to school whose parents were up fighting all night, they somehow create an environment where reading becomes a priority, and they really want to fulfill that ability for them to become lifelong learners. And I don't think any of our teachers lack the motivation to develop that student. It is very difficult, though, to keep your morale up day after day after day when you don't have the support from community, when you don't have support from your state legislators, when you don't have support from a budget. It's very hard to keep your morale up. But our teachers, I would never say they're not functioning at 200%. And I need to make sure I qualify this. It's not just teachers. Listen, teachers do a great job, but without our paraprofessionals and our classified staff in those classrooms all the time, aiding and assisting in the educational process, without our custodial and facility staff making sure that the buildings are operating the way they should be operating, without our food service staff that's there all the time making sure that there's good nutritional foods. I mean, it's not just teachers, it's all these employee groups within our district that have felt sort of the brunt of Act 10. So when we're 21 years in the school district, I see them functioning, and they do function as a team. There's not teachers here, support staff here, custodial staff here, food staff here, and then the administrators, they're functioning as a team. So this is really something that's hurt the entire family.
I think your answer really clarified my question. And I think I'll just leave that alone.
Okay.
I think that's a smart thing to do.
Okay.
Now, you're on the school board, and school board, from my point of view, is considered to be part of management. Okay?
Okay.
So, what has been the reaction of the school board to Act 10?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to just maybe qualify how your definition is part of management. I think we're elected to represent community values. We're elected to represent what's in the best interest of public education, and that would include being aware of managerial styles, professional development styles. It would be making sure we're speaking to our stakeholders, that are educators in there, our community members. So in that regard, I think it's not so much management as it is making sure we're reflecting the best public education system. With that backdrop, John, what the Eau Claire School Board did basically was put everything on hold. We said we can't just all of a sudden arbitrarily start tearing up the rule books and the standards and the contracts and everything else. We need to keep the family intact. We need to make sure we communicate with all of our employee union groups, with managers, with administrators, with the community, to continue making sure that there's not a huge interruption of services for students as we try to adjust to Act 10. So as a district, we took a year and left everything as a status quo so that we could begin talking about how do we make this transition with the least amount of disruption as possible. At which point in time, that entire year, we talked with employee groups, we talked with community groups, we talked with administrators. We really tried to say, to what degree are we going to be able to create now, instead of a contract, John, a handbook, which, a handbook basically reflects much of what the contract did, but now the handbook is written by the school board, not by anybody else. Before, the contract was a accumulation of everyone's ideas and mutually agreed upon. Now school boards have complete and utter authority to determine the standards they want. So in that regard, you're certainly right. It's management in its highest form. But our school board did not take that authority on without much collaboration with all the groups that are impacted. And then to take into consideration the budget challenge that we had. That's the other one. We can't do anything about the fact that the state of Wisconsin, for example, this last year, decided that they would take $2.5 million right off of our budget that they had given us to work with for this academic year. It's gone. So how then do you deal with that? So essentially, I think what our school board has done is try to maintain a flavor of collaboration, communication, working together, and respectful dialogue so that we can address these problems in light of budget deficits. The only thing that an employee group now can negotiate, can sit down and, from this side to this side, is they're starting the increase in your base wages. We had contracts that were 60-plus pages. The base wage is maybe a half a paragraph. So everything else is gone except the base wage, and it says that the school district has a board has a responsibility to negotiate the increase in base wage with their employee group. With this caveat, it can't exceed the cost of living. So there really isn't a negotiation. There's been a ceiling that was put on. So even if our community and our school board felt that we should be showing some compensation, gratitude because of the significant losses they've taken over the last 4 or 5 years, we can't because there's a ceiling put on that with the cost of living.
I think approximately the same thing is happening to your county board and your city council as well.
Absolutely, John. That's a great point. This is not just and that's why I don't want to say this is a teacher issue. This isn't about teachers. This is about public services that are being offered throughout our community. And whether it's county services, city services, library services, public education services, health services, police enforcement services, this is really impacting all of those services, and it's having a pretty significant effect.
Now, the public has been told that their taxes have been cut. Not by much. So, I'm leading up to this question. What kind of feedback are you getting from students and their parents regarding Act 10 and budget cuts and those tax cuts, property tax cuts?
Very little in terms of property tax cuts. I think when you do that statewide average, it may look as though your property tax goes down, and probably on a statewide basis it does. But for the Eau Claire County, it did not go down. I mean, if you paid more this year than you did the year before. That's a complicated formula, and it's divided into so many different areas: your district tax, your technical college taxes, the variety of other taxes. So I don't get any feedback about property taxes at all. And quite honestly, John, if there's any dialogue at all, it's people saying, I wouldn't mind paying a little extra because I think public education or public services or law enforcement or the Confluence Project, as that goes, I think that there are certain public entities that are really important, and I don't mind paying a little extra. Now, I understand that there are a lot of people on fixed income who just simply can't, and that's a dilemma that we have to deal with. As far as students, I think students have expressed, I'm not going to say frustration. I think they enjoy what's happening in their schools. They'd like to be able to take a variety of different curricular areas. They have said we don't want to have things cut back, electives cut back. We want to have our humanities. We want to have our world languages. We have so many electives that are going on in our schools right now. And the students and parents are saying, don't touch those. And we haven't touched those. We've made other adjustments, but we haven't touched those programs. And we're hoping that we won't have to touch those programs. Those are the very skills that they're going to need to compete with international students for the 30 and 40 years of their adult life. So we really can't be cutting back on the curricular areas. That's one bit of feedback I get from students a lot.
What about sports? Sports is a big thing with the students and the community, and have there been cutbacks in regards to sports? Have the kids had to pay extra dollars, that is, the parents pay extra dollars to, say, play football, baseball, basketball, that type of thing?
Sure. Probably 6 months ago, I think it was, there was a rather large public discussion about the amount of fees that our students in the Eau Claire district have to pay compared to other school districts. Altoona, Chippewa Falls, Fall Creek, for example, their students don't have to pay to play. Because they feel that it's important for all sorts of other social and emotional development skills that are necessary. Our students in Eau Claire pay a pretty significant price to participate, and that is an area that many of our citizens feel is not appropriate. In having them pay to play, for lack of a better word of saying it, we do generate, I'm not exactly sure. I want to say it's close to $250,000 in those fees to help defray costs, but other schools are able to provide that without collecting that fee. Does it discourage individuals from participating? That was one of the questions when the board did that, and that was, 6 years ago, I think, is will it impact participation? And so we kept the longitudinal data on that, and there was a little blimp right at first, but from that time on, there hasn't been a significant decrease in participation. But that doesn't mean that families that are economically strapped just simply aren't having their kids participate. $300 is a lot of money, and if you've got a couple of kids in sports, that's a pretty significant chunk of change.
I agree.
Yeah.
No argument from me.
Yeah.
The Eau Claire School Board just passed this budget just recently, correct?
They did.
Okay, so how will this affect negotiations, A, with the teachers, and B, with your support staff, custodial people, teachers' assistants? How will negotiations be affected under this budget?
Well, there are no negotiations anymore. So just let's make sure we understand that. That's hard for people to wrap their head around. There are no negotiations anymore. If in the past we would negotiate, for example, that we would have an extra hour of time on a class day thing, that would have to be negotiated, and we'd figure out how we would do that most effectively. Now we just simply can arbitrarily say it.
Yep.
So there are no negotiations. What it will affect, though, is the percent of increase in pay, because as we said, each of those groups can have up to 1.5%. I think the cost of living is 1.6.
That's exactly what I was after.
Yeah, it's the one they can have, and our board has chosen to do that 1.6. But we also, and I say we, I'm no longer on it, I don't want to misrepresent anyone. The board currently is studying a compensation plan, because we understand and we're very concerned about, as a district, when I say we, not me as a board member, that we're going to lose teachers, we're going to lose custodians, we're going to lose administrators, because our pay in the district is significantly less than other comparable professionals. So they're undertaking a compensation study right now to say, how do we address the discrepancy in pay to make sure that, first of all, we can recruit good professionals, and secondly, that we can retain those professionals.
Okay. We have 4 minutes left, according to our overseer here. Okay.
Okay.
The fellow who likes to stay off camera.
Okay.
He's kind of
okay.
shy about this type of
It
thing.
just flies by when you talk about something so as important as preparing our human capital to go into the future and make sure that we live in a safe, secure, and thriving society. This is our natural resource, John. We get all excited about frac sand mining. How come people don't get excited about what's happening to our natural resource of human capital and
point.
how that's changing?
Well, that's why you're here.
Well,
Because
I am excited about that, and it's
Well,
important.
you're not the only one, Carol. You're not the only
I
one.
know, I know.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add? What did you appreciate most about being on the school board?
Without a doubt, the opportunity to connect with community organizations, community members, working with professionals, paraprofessionals. Some of my best conversations were, I swear, with custodians and maintenance staff who know more about what's happening inside the school than anybody because they're there all the time. That ability to communicate effectively, to capture the community values, what values exist, and how do we then reflect those in policies at the Eau Claire School District level. So that was by far the most rewarding.
Did you have much contact with students and their parents? I just wonder. I'm kind of reaching there.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I had a lot of contact with parents, not so much students. As you just asked that question, I was reflecting back, and there would be some times that I would get involved in National History Days when students had projects and whatnot. But in terms of informal dialogue and chatting with students as to how things are going, no, I didn't. But that was one thing right before I left the board. We asked to have our new superintendent develop student satisfaction surveys so that we would begin having input in that area.
Okay. Well, let's see now. That's all we have for now. My sincere thanks to Carol. Thank you very much, Carol.
You're welcome, John.
Okay.
Time went flying by.
It does when you're having fun.
There you go.
And let's see. My sincere appreciation to the audience. After all, if it wasn't for the audience, we wouldn't have much of a show now, would we? And of course, without Carol, we wouldn't have any show at all. So, thank you very much.
Chippewa Valley Community Television is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, you can contact us by calling 715-839-5067 or on the web at www.cbctv.org.